A bartender vanishes at a remote pub 6 years later. What's found in a nearby motel room will leave you speechless. You must join our channel and hit subscribe, because only those who seek the truth behind disappearances will do it before this story begins. The cracked neon sign above the Silver Pine pub sputtered weakly, casting a flickering glow onto the cracked sidewalk. It was just past dusk, and the chill of early autumn hung in the air, making the worn wooden door creak ominously whenever the wind pushed against it. Dylan crouched beside the broken brick wall of the old Blue Crest Motel, his flashlight beam trembling as it danced across a small gap hidden behind a loosened panel. His heart thudded unevenly, half from the thrill of discovery and half from the creeping unease that settled deep in his chest. He had come looking for shadows and stories forgotten by the town, but what he found was something far heavier. Inside the narrow space was a dusty box, its edges frayed with age, buried beneath years of grime and cobwebs. Dylan's fingers hesitated, brushing away debris before lifting the lid with a soft creak that seemed deafening in the quiet night. The air smelled musty, thick with the weight of secrets. Nestled inside were belongings he instantly recognized from Old Town rumors: a folded shirt, stained dark with what looked like dried blood, and a leather-bound journal with worn edges. On top lay a folded map, its surface marked with strange symbols that made Dylan's skin prickle. His breath caught. This was Lucas Trent's. The name echoed in his mind, heavy with whispered questions and ghost stories. 6 years ago, Lucas had vanished without a trace from this very town, Greyford, a place frozen by silence and suspicion. Everyone had their theory, but no one had answers. Now Dylan held the first real piece of the puzzle. His fingers trembled slightly as he touched the journal's cover, feeling the rough leather beneath his palm. "What were you mixed up in, Lucas?" he whispered into the night, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Miles away, on a cracked and winding road leading into town, a car rattled over gravel and fallen leaves. Aaron Trent gripped the steering wheel with knuckles white from tension. The weight of the past pressed down on him like the heavy fog rolling off the pine-covered hills. He hadn't set foot in Greyford since the rumors swallowed his brother whole. But now, a message from Dylan, a stranger to him just days before, had unearthed something he could no longer ignore. The journal's pages had spoken of betrayal, danger, and a secret wound festering beneath the town's calm surface. Aaron's jaw tightened as memories flashed. Lucas's quick smile, the rare laughter behind the bar, and the men who gathered in the Silver Pine's shadowy back room, men Aaron never trusted. He had walked away then, leaving the mystery behind, hoping it would fade. But some things refused to die quietly. "It's time," he muttered, pulling his worn leather jacket tighter against the cold as the headlights cut through the thickening dusk. Back at the motel, Dylan rifled through the journal's yellowed pages. The handwriting was hurried and fragmented, filled with cryptic references and names he couldn't yet place. Gambling debts, debt collectors, dangerous alliances, he read aloud, voice trembling with disbelief. He paused at a line that spoke of a meeting, something about the edge of the forest and eyes watching in the dark. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just about a missing bartender anymore. It was something far darker. The Silver Pine pub itself loomed in the distance, a relic of wood and shadows. To the casual eye, it looked like any old bar clinging to fading glory. But Dylan's research and the journal's clues painted a different picture. Behind its worn facade lay a secret world, one filled with whispered deals and men who crossed lines that most wouldn't dare approach. Lucas had been caught in the middle, caught and then silenced. Aaron's return to Greyford was met with muted glances and stiff shoulders. The town seemed frozen in time, as if the disappearance had sucked its spirit dry. He walked the cracked streets with a cautious determination, each step a silent battle between resentment and hope. At the diner, he caught sight of familiar faces hardened by time, their eyes reflecting old fears and fresh suspicions. He knew he couldn't trust everyone, not yet. That night, Aaron sat alone in a dimly lit room, the journal spread before him like a roadmap through a minefield. Every entry deepened the mystery, but one truth rang clear. Betrayal didn't just come from outside. It festered within, perhaps even within his own family. The thought twisted inside him like a blade. Who could have turned against Lucas? Who had the power to make him vanish? The wind outside whispered through cracked windows as Aaron rose, packing his few belongings into a battered leather jacket. His eyes, hardened yet weary, stared into the darkness beyond. "I can't ignore this anymore," he whispered to himself as he stepped onto the dusty road back to Greyford. Aaron stepped off the bus, the crunch of gravel under his boots loud in the heavy silence that hung over Greyford. The air was sharp, carrying the faint scent of damp pine and cold earth. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, his eyes scanning the familiar yet strangely hollow streets. Buildings stood still, frozen in neglect, the paint peeling, windows shuttered, and signs faded by years of sun and rain. The Silver Pine pub, once the beating heart of the town, loomed ahead like a forgotten relic. Its darkened windows and boarded doors gave it the look of a tomb, the neon sign long dead. The sight twisted Aaron's gut. He walked with measured steps toward the town's diner, the only place where he might find answers or at least a flicker of the life that once was. The door chimed faintly as he entered, but the atmosphere inside was anything but warm. The diner's interior smelled of stale coffee and worn vinyl booths. The few men seated at the counters and tables turned their heads slowly, their eyes sharp and wary, watching Aaron like he was a ghost from a past best left undisturbed. Aaron's heart tightened with each hesitant glance. His name was met with silence or forced nods, the weight of suspicion thick in the air. No one spoke freely, and the tension felt as tangible as the fog outside. He made his way to the counter, where the waitress gave him a curt nod but no smile. At a far booth, a tall man caught Aaron's attention, a figure with a scar running from cheek to jawline, a permanent line carved by time and violence. It was Tom Jensen, the former security guard of the Silver Pine and one of Lucas's closest friends. Tom's eyes flickered with recognition, but there was a guarded hardness to his gaze as Aaron approached. "Tom," Aaron said quietly, his voice rough from years away. Tom's jaw tightened as he shifted in his seat. "Aaron," he replied, voice low and cautious. "Didn't expect to see you back here." "I need to know what happened," Aaron said, lowering his voice. "About Lucas. About the night he disappeared." Tom glanced around the diner, then leaned forward, the scar on his face deepening as his expression grew serious. "You don't want to dig up old trouble," he warned. His voice was strained but steady. "Lucas got himself caught with the wrong crowd, men who don't forgive or forget. You step into their world, and you don't know what's waiting for you." Aaron's pulse quickened. "What kind of men?" Tom hesitated, swallowing hard before continuing. "Powerful men. They run things here." Behind the Silver Pine, there was more than just late-night drinks and card games. Lucas found something, a ledger. Names, debts, deals that linked some of the town's most respected men to things that don't see the light of day. Aaron's breath hitched. The ledger disappeared with him? Tom nodded grimly. If it's still out there, it could tear this town apart. Bring half the people in this room crashing down. The words settled on Aaron like a weight. He stared down into his coffee cup, swirling the bitter liquid as the diner's quiet murmurs pressed in around him. Trust was a rare commodity here. Friends might be foes, and allies could turn their backs in a heartbeat. Every glance felt like a silent accusation, every word a test. The line between safety and danger blurred with each passing second. That night, Aaron sat alone in the small room of a rented motel, the faded journal his only company. The pages were worn, the ink smeared in places, filled with coded entries and symbols that twisted like a maze. He traced his fingers over cryptic notes about secret meetings deep in the forest and odd deliveries to the pub. One name stood out like a shadow lurking behind every line: Mason Cole. The name sent a chill through him. Mason was a man known to many but truly understood by few. A businessman with a polished smile and iron grip, pulling strings from the shadows. Mason's influence reached far beyond Greyford, and Aaron's mind raced as he pieced together the connections. If Mason was behind Lucas's disappearance, Then this was bigger than he ever imagined. Aaron closed the journal with a slow breath, the wind outside howling through cracked windows like a warning. His jaw tightened as resolve hardened within him. If Mason's behind this, then I'm already in deeper than I thought, he muttered, the words hanging heavy in the cold night air. Mason Cole sat motionless in his grand study, the muted glow of the city lights barely reaching the heavy curtains drawn against the cold night. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the polished mahogany desk, a quiet metronome to the storm brewing inside him. His eyes, sharp and calculating, stared at the flickering image on the security monitor. An empty street, but every shadow whispered of unseen threats. The ledger, that damned ledger, haunted him like a ghost he couldn't banish. It was the one piece that could unravel the empire he had built with ruthless precision. Across the room, Victor Hale leaned against the wall, his tall frame casting a long shadow. His face was set in a permanent scowl, eyes cold and hard as steel. "Still nothing," Victor said quietly, voice low but laced with frustration. "Every lead dead ends. The town's tight-lipped, but it's like the ledger vanished into thin air." Mason's lips curled into a thin smile. "Then we widen the net. No one connected to Trent or his brother gets to breathe easy. Find them, pressure the weak, break whoever stands in our way." His voice was calm, but beneath it thrummed a threat far deeper than words. Victor nodded, muscles tensing. "They don't know what's coming." Back in Greyford, Aaron Trent's breath came in shallow bursts, the chill of the abandoned silver pine seeping through his jacket. Beside him, Dylan's eyes flicked nervously around the decaying barroom, their footsteps muffled by decades of dust and neglect. The air smelled stale, a mix of old wood and forgotten secrets, thick enough to choke on. Aaron's fingers brushed over the faded journal pages he had carried since arriving, each cryptic note a thread leading deeper into a tangled web of lies. "If Lucas hid the ledger here," Aaron whispered, voice tense with a mix of hope and dread, "this has to be it." The two men moved toward the cellar door at the back, barely visible behind a rotting curtain. Dylan's hand paused on the rusted handle, heart pounding. "You ready?" Aaron gave a short nod. "We don't have a choice." They creaked the door open, revealing a narrow staircase swallowed by shadows. The wooden steps groaned under their weight as they descended, each movement stirring decades of dust into the stale air. Aaron's pulse raced, not just from the climb, but from the heavy burden of what they might find below. The basement was a cavern of forgotten things. Crates stacked haphazardly, shattered bottles glinting like broken promises, and at the far end, a metal safe bolted firmly to the wall. Dylan knelt, producing a slim set of lockpicks from his jacket, a skill born from late nights exploring urban ruins and hacking security systems. The lock clicked open with a quiet sigh of surrender. Inside lay a small, leather-bound ledger, its worn cover cracked but intact. Aaron's hands trembled as he lifted it, fingers tracing the familiar shape that had consumed so many sleepless nights. "This is it," he breathed, eyes shining with a fierce mixture of relief and resolve. Suddenly, the faintest sound, footsteps above, slow and deliberate, froze them both in place. Dylan's eyes snapped wide, searching the dim light for an escape route. "Someone's coming," Aaron hissed, sliding behind a stack of crates, clutching the ledger tightly against his chest. Their breaths slowed, ears straining to catch every creak of the floorboards. The basement door above them groaned open, and a shadow fell across the staircase, broad, menacing. Victor Hale's voice cut through the silence like a blade, low and threatening. "You don't understand who you're messing with." His steps echoed down the stairs with cold purpose. "Hand over that ledger, or things will get very ugly." Dylan swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. "We don't have a choice. We have to run." Aaron and Dylan didn't hesitate. They broke into a full sprint, their footsteps pounding against the cracked pavement of Greyford's winding streets. The weight of the leather-bound ledger dug into Aaron's side with every jarring step, its presence a constant reminder of the secrets it held, secrets powerful enough to shatter the town's fragile peace. Behind them, Victor Hale's voice echoed off the cold brick walls, sharp and threatening. "You don't get to hide this, Trent. Give it up now." Shadows twisted in every alleyway, and Aaron's pulse quickened as his eyes darted to every movement, every silhouette that might be an enemy lurking just beyond sight. The town that once seemed so familiar now felt like a labyrinth designed to trap them, its streets narrowing into traps with every turn. Sweat stung Aaron's eyes, mixing with the sharp chill of the night air. He swallowed hard, forcing his lungs to keep pace despite the tightening grip of fear. "Keep moving," he urged Dylan, who stumbled once but caught himself, cheeks flushed and hands trembling. Their destination was the old forest, a tangled thicket Lucas had cryptically called the last refuge. The dense canopy loomed ahead like a dark wall, branches clawing against the sky as if trying to block out the stars. Aaron's boots crunched against dead leaves and twigs as they slipped beneath the towering pines, the scent of damp earth and pine needles filling the air. The forest was alive with the sounds of night, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures darting through underbrush, and the soft, steady thump of their own breathing. "If Lucas hid something here," Aaron whispered, voice barely more than a breath, "this is where we'll find it." Dylan nodded silently, his eyes wide but determined, even as his fingers tightened into a white-knuckled grip on his jacket. Fatigue tugged at his limbs, but adrenaline pushed them forward. They moved deeper, following the jagged lines etched on the worn map, symbols carved crudely into tree trunks, like ancient runes guiding them through the maze. Aaron traced the markings with a finger, heart thudding as the path narrowed. Soon, the trees gave way to a small clearing, where a cabin crouched beneath a tangle of vines and moss, as if nature itself was trying to swallow it whole. The wooden structure was weather-beaten and sagging, its windows clouded with grime and shuttered by time. Aaron's breath caught as they approached the door, which creaked ominously when Dylan pushed it open. Inside, the stale air smelled of mold and old smoke. Dust particles floated in the narrow shafts of moonlight filtering through cracks in the roof. The cabin was small but cluttered. Empty whiskey bottles littered the floor, torn scraps of paper lay scattered across a rickety table, and a radio transmitter sat humming softly, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. "This place hasn't been abandoned for long," Dylan murmured, eyes scanning every shadow. "Someone's been here recently." Before Aaron could reply, a sharp snap echoed from outside, a brittle crack of a breaking branch. Instantly, the cabin plunged into tense silence. Both men froze, senses heightened, every muscle coiled like a spring. The door creaked open slowly, and a cold, cruel smile spread across Mason Cole's face as he stepped inside, flanked by two hulking men, their fingers twitching near the triggers of their guns. "I admire your persistence, Aaron," Mason said, voice low and smooth, yet dripping with menace. His eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a predator cornering prey. "But you don't realize you're outmatched." Aaron gripped the ledger tight, feeling the leather press against his palm. His mind raced for a way out, every instinct screamed to fight, but there were too many against too few. His gaze flicked to Dylan, searching for any sign of a plan. Mason took a step forward, the weight of his presence filling the room. "Hand it over," he said slowly, "and maybe I'll spare your lives." Dylan's fingers moved almost imperceptibly, slipping beneath his jacket to a small device. Aaron caught the glint, a radio transmitter. With a quick, subtle press, a harsh red light exploded throughout the cabin, bathing the walls in an urgent glow. The radio emitted a sharp, piercing alarm. Mason cursed under his breath, signaling his men. The room erupted into chaos as the armed men raised their weapons and fired wildly. Bullets shattered the dusty windows, splinters flying through the air like deadly shards. Aaron and Dylan dove behind a toppled table, hearts hammering in their chests, ears ringing from the deafening noise. Shards of glass rained down around them as Aaron's breath came in ragged gasps. The cold barrel of a gun pressed against his side for a split second before he ducked away. His eyes met Dylan's, fear, determination, and something fierce burning in both. The chase was far from over. As the gunfire echoed, Aaron's thoughts raced through everything they had uncovered. The journal entries, the ledger, The secret's Mason was desperate to hide. Lucas's disappearance wasn't a random tragedy. It was a warning, a message wrapped in silence. Mason's web stretched wider than Aaron had feared, pulling at every corner of the town's fragile peace. But surrender was not an option. Not now. "We're not done yet," Aaron whispered fiercely, voice barely audible over the ringing in his ears. Not by a long shot. Aaron's lungs burned as he and Dylan scrambled through the thick forest, the ledger's weight digging into his back like a stone. Behind them, the sharp crack of gunfire ripped through the night, bullets smashing into splintering wood and shattering branches. The old cabin, once a quiet refuge, was collapsing under a hailstorm of bullets. The acrid smell of gunpowder mingled with the damp earth and pine needles beneath their feet. Branches clawed at their faces, tearing at clothes and skin alike. Roots tangled in their frantic strides, threatening to send them sprawling into the cold darkness. Every breath Aaron took was ragged, desperate, a violent contrast to the eerie stillness of the woods around them. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm as his mind raced for a place to hide, a moment to breathe, and a plan to end this nightmare. The ledger thumped heavily in his pack, its leather binding worn but stubbornly intact. It was more than a book filled with names and numbers. It was a lifeline and a noose. Each page carried the weight of secrets Mason Cole had tried to bury forever, and now those secrets hunted them both. The moon, a pale guardian overhead, barely pierced the dense canopy. Shadows twisted and flickered in the undergrowth, shaping ghostly forms that played tricks on Aaron's eyes. Time slipped away with every step, a slippery thread unraveling too quickly. Ahead, the faint outline of a clearing appeared, a forgotten ranger station. The weathered wooden building sat like a relic from a lost era, its faded green paint peeling and rust crawling across its metal roof. The silence here was deeper, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl and the uneven pounding of their footsteps. Aaron shoved the door open with a groan, the rusty hinges protesting loudly in the still night. Inside, dust hung thick in the stale air, coating every surface in a dull gray. The faint scent of mold and aged wood filled their nostrils. They slipped inside quickly, the door banging shut behind them. Aaron grabbed a broken chair nearby and wedged it under the handle, his muscles trembling as he pushed it into place. Dylan dropped to his knees, flicking on the light of his phone with shaking hands. The dim glow illuminated the ledger spread across a chipped wooden table, its pages filled with handwritten entries, numbers, and hastily drawn symbols. Dylan's eyes scanned quickly, widening with each line he read. This is bigger than I imagined," he whispered, voice thick with disbelief and growing fear. "Mason isn't just running a local racket. He's controlling half the county's dirty money. Look at these names, Aaron. Every major business, every politician, all tied to him." Aaron crouched beside Dylan, feeling a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The ledger wasn't just proof, it was a weapon that could topple an empire, but also one that could destroy anyone who dared to use it. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked beneath heavy footsteps. Both men snapped their heads toward the door, muscles tensing like coiled springs. The door swung open slowly, revealing a figure silhouetted in the dim light. Tom Jensen stumbled in, his tall frame swaying as he clutched a deep, bleeding gash on his arm. His scarred cheek was pale, streaked with grime and sweat. His breaths came fast and shallow, each one a reminder of the close call that had brought him here. "I barely escaped," he said, voice hoarse and urgent. "Victor's hunting us all. No one's safe. But I found something else, Lucas's phone." Tom pulled the battered device from a torn pocket. Its cracked screen glowed faintly, a stubborn flicker against the darkness. "There's a message on here, something Lucas never put in his journal." Aaron reached out, fingers trembling as he took the phone. The device felt fragile, like holding a spark that could either light a fire or burn everything to ash. The screen shifted to a video file, shaky and grainy but unmistakably Lucas's face filling the frame. Lucas's eyes were haunted but fierce, his voice low and strained with urgency. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone," he said, pausing to swallow hard. Mason Cole can't be trusted. The ledger is just the surface. There's a plan that will destroy this town if he's not stopped. The recording cut off suddenly, plunging the room into a chilling silence that pressed down on them like a heavy fog. Aaron's jaw clenched, the muscles working tight beneath his skin. Lucas had been trying to warn someone, maybe everyone. But the question twisted inside Aaron's mind like a blade. Who was Lucas's true confidant? How deep did this conspiracy run? And how many lives were already caught in its web? Tom looked between the two younger men, urgency flickering in his tired eyes. We don't have much time. Mason will be back, and he'll bring more men. Aaron's fists curled tightly around the edge of the table, knuckles whitening with determination. The weight of the ledger pressed on him as heavily as the threat looming outside these fragile walls. Then we finish this tonight. The night pressed heavily on the old ranger station, its weathered wooden walls creaking with every gust of wind that slipped through the cracked windows. Inside, Aaron Trent sat hunched over a battered table, the dim glow of a flashlight casting sharp shadows across his grim face. The ledger lay open before him, its stained pages whispering secrets of corruption and betrayal. Dylan leaned against the wall nearby, fingers flying over the cracked screen of Lucas's phone, while Tom Jensen paced with a slow, deliberate tension, his scarred jaw clenched tight. Aaron's eyes darted between the two men, weighing their next move. We can't stay here long, he said, voice low but firm. If Mason finds us, this place won't hold up. His gaze settled on the faded map spread beneath the ledger. We need allies, men who once worked with Mason but might be ready to turn. Dylan rubbed his temple, exhaustion etched deep in his youthful face. The sheriff, he said finally. Paul Hargrove. He's been under Mason's thumb for years, but people say he's honest. Maybe we can get him on our side. Aaron hesitated. Sheriff Hargrove was a quiet man, worn down by years of running a town shackled by fear. Still, they had no better option. Risky, but worth a shot. Slipping out into the cold night, the trio moved through the shadows toward the sheriff's modest office near the town square. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath their boots. Aaron's heart pounded, not from the cold, but the weight of uncertainty. What if the sheriff had been compromised? At the door, Aaron raised a clenched fist, hesitated, then knocked sharply. The door creaked open to reveal Paul Hargrove's tired, lined face. His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with cautious recognition. Aaron Trent, I didn't expect to see you here. Aaron met the sheriff's steady gaze. Paul, I need your help. He held up the ledger and Lucas's phone, letting the weight of evidence speak for itself. Mason Cole's grip on this town is worse than anyone admits. We have proof. Hargrove's jaw tightened. If what you say is true, then this goes deeper than I feared. His voice dropped, heavy with frustration. But you understand, some in my department won't take kindly to this. Mason's men are everywhere. Aaron nodded, understanding the unspoken danger. I don't expect an army, just a few good men you trust. We keep this quiet, for now. The sheriff looked away, the burden of years clear in the tight lines around his eyes. I'll do what I can, but be careful, Aaron. This isn't just about courage, it's about survival. Back at the ranger station, the atmosphere thickened with tension. While Aaron and the sheriff forged a fragile alliance, Mason Cole and Victor Hale prowled the streets like wolves sensing a fracture in their prey. Rumors of interrogations and disappearances spread like wildfire, tightening the noose around anyone daring to resist. Inside the cramped room, Dylan's fingers paused on the phone's screen. There's more, he whispered, scrolling through encrypted files Lucas had hidden away. Audio recordings, documents. His voice caught as he read aloud names and references that stretched far beyond Grayford. Money laundering, illegal arms deals, bribery at the state level. The quiet dread in the room grew palpable. Aaron swallowed hard, the full weight of their fight pressing down on him. This isn't just a local mess, he said quietly. It's a national crisis. Tom let out a slow breath, gaze fixed on the ledger's worn pages. Every friend we find, every secret we uncover, it's another step closer to the edge. Aaron's eyes burned with determination as he stared out the frost-streaked window at the sleeping town. The stakes had never been higher. "This is bigger than us," he said grimly. "We're fighting for the soul of Greyford." The crowd's laughter and chatter filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of caramel apples and the crispness of autumn leaves rustling in the breeze. Strings of orange and yellow lights hung from the pavilion, casting a warm glow over the bustling town square. Children darted between food stalls, their cheeks flushed with excitement, while local bands tuned their instruments, preparing for the night's entertainment. It was a scene of celebration, of normalcy, the kind that made Greyford feel alive again. But beneath the laughter, a storm was quietly brewing. In the shadowed control booth beneath the pavilion, Aaron's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the cables, his eyes darting between the flickering screens and the crowd beyond the glass window. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from the autumn chill, but from the weight of what was about to happen. Beside him, Dylan's fingers flew over the keyboard, breaking through layers of encryption that protected the files they needed to expose Mason Cole once and for all. "Almost there?" Dylan murmured, eyes locked on the rapidly changing code. His voice was tight, edged with nervous energy, but determination burned in his gaze. "Give me another minute." Aaron exhaled slowly, forcing calm into his voice. "We don't have much time. Once this starts, there's no turning back." His jaw clenched as the distant sound of footsteps echoed outside the booth, a sharp reminder that Victor's men could appear any second. They both knew the risks. If they failed, Mason's reach would tighten even more, silencing anyone who dared defy him. But if they succeeded, the entire town could finally see the truth. No more whispered fears or hidden threats. The ledger's damning names, the debts, the lies, it was all there, ready to be unveiled in front of the very people Mason had manipulated for years. Outside, Sheriff Paul Hargrove stood near the festival's edge, his posture tense but resolute. He had gathered a handful of deputies who still believed in justice, men willing to stand against the corruption festering in Greyford's veins. Yet even his steady hands betrayed a flicker of doubt. The weight of betrayal within his own department pressed heavily on him. He caught Aaron's eye through the crowd once and gave a subtle nod, a silent promise that they were in this together. Back in the booth, Dylan's screen flickered as the final barriers broke down. "We're live," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Aaron's heart pounded like a drum in his chest as he reached out and pressed the play button. Suddenly, the vibrant sounds of the festival faded, replaced by a chilling silence. The large screen above the pavilion blinked, then flickered to life, revealing a grainy but unmistakable image. Lucas Trent's face, tired but determined, staring straight into the camera. The crowd hushed, the murmur of voices dropping to a tense silence as Lucas's voice filled the speakers, low and urgent. "If you're watching this, it means the truth can no longer be hidden. Mason Cole's grip on Greyford is built on lies, on debts that enslave good men and destroy families. The ledger you're about to see is proof of a corruption that runs deeper than anyone wanted to admit." As the ledger's pages began to scroll across the screen, names appeared, businessmen, officials, even law enforcement officers, each one tied to illegal loans, bribes, and silence bought with fear. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd like a wave, faces turning pale as the scale of Mason's empire unfolded before them. Aaron felt his hands tighten around the edge of the booth. He watched Mason Cole standing a few feet away, his usual polished smile replaced by a cold, hard glare. The powerful man's jaw twitched with suppressed rage as the crowd's mood shifted from celebration to chaos. "Do you hear that, Mason?" Aaron whispered to himself, voice steady despite the flood of adrenaline. "Your lies are crumbling." The first shout broke the silence, a woman's voice demanding answers. Soon, others joined, voices rising in anger and disbelief. Mason's security moved to intervene, but the crowd surged, emboldened by the revelation. Friends and neighbors confronted one another, old alliances shattered by the undeniable truth. Aaron's gaze met Dylan's, who gave a brief, exhausted smile. They had done what seemed impossible. Shattered the silence that had held Grayford captive. Tonight, everything changes, Aaron whispered, watching the unraveling with a mix of hope and fear. If that moment sent chills down your spine, don't stay silent. Subscribe and become a member, because uncovering hidden secrets takes courage. The broadcast shattered the silence like a thunderclap. In the dimly lit town square, the flickering screen displayed Lucas's weary face, his voice steady but filled with urgency. As the names scrolled relentlessly across the screen, names once whispered in shadows but now laid bare, people gasped, murmured, and some even cried out in disbelief. The ledger's evidence was irrefutable, each entry a thread unraveling years of lies. Faces turned pale, hands trembled, and the weight of truth crashed over Grayford like a tidal wave. Mason Cole stood in the shadows of his hidden safe house, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched tight. The empire he had meticulously built was crumbling faster than he had anticipated. He paced the room with the restless energy of a cornered animal, the cold leather of his chair pressing against his palms as he finally sank down, a mask of calm barely hiding the storm within. "They think this ends here," he muttered, voice low and dangerous. "They don't understand what I'm capable of." Beside him, Victor Hale's lips curled into a hard, grim smile. "Loose ends need tying," Victor said, his tone icy and devoid of mercy. "We finish this, no mistakes." Outside, the town was awakening to a new reality. Aaron Trent stood near the Silver Pines' weathered porch, the cold night air biting at his cheeks, his breath forming pale clouds that drifted upward and vanished. He listened to the distant murmurs of townsfolk gathering, voices thick with disbelief and hope tangled together. His hands gripped the worn leather of Lucas's journal, grounding him. Though exhaustion weighed on his shoulders, a fierce fire burned in his chest. The broadcast had changed everything, but it had also made enemies more desperate. State police vehicles rolled into Grayford with flashing lights that painted the dark streets in urgent blue and red. Federal agents, sharp-eyed and serious, moved quickly, setting up command centers and interviewing witnesses. The atmosphere was charged, a fragile balance between relief and apprehension. Aaron found himself shadowed by the eyes of both allies and potential threats. Every handshake, every nod felt laced with caution. He sat in a cramped conference room, maps and photos spread out before him. Sheriff Paul Hargrove, his face etched with weariness, spoke quietly but firmly. "This is bigger than we imagined, Aaron. Mason's ties reach into places I feared. But with this evidence, we can start to cut them down." Aaron nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing deeper. "We can't let up now. Too much has already been sacrificed." Late that night, as the town settled into uneasy sleep, Aaron's phone buzzed sharply against the wooden table. He picked it up, the screen displaying an unknown number. The message was brief but chilling. "You started a war you can't win." His fingers tightened around the device, a cold sweat breaking across his palms. Fear tried to creep in, whispering of all the friends who could be lost, the family who might suffer. But Aaron swallowed it back. This was the fight Lucas had died warning about. He wouldn't back down. Across the square, the Silver Pine pub flickered with a new kind of light. The old neon sign, repaired and glowing softly, cast a hopeful hue onto the cracked sidewalk. Inside, the men who had stood with Aaron gathered, faces marked by sleepless nights, bruises, and quiet determination. The air was thick with the scent of worn wood and fresh coffee. Aaron looked at them, his voice steady but filled with raw emotion. "This is our home," he said, meeting each man's eyes. "And we're not letting it fall." Rain hammered the cracked pavement as Dylan hurried from the sheriff's office, his coat pulled tight against the cold. The streetlights flickered in the gloom, casting long shadows between the shuttered storefronts. His heart pounded, a mix of exhaustion and relief after hours spent decrypting files on Lucas's phone. He barely noticed the faint sound of footsteps echoing behind him until rough hands yanked him backward. A masked man clamped a hand over Dylan's mouth, muffling his startled gasp. Other figures closed in swiftly, their grip iron-tight as they dragged him toward a waiting black van. The cold metal of the door slammed shut, and the engine roared to life, swallowing the sounds of the desperate struggle. Dylan's fists pounded against the van's walls, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Fear clawed at his throat, but beneath it burned a flicker of defiance. They wanted to silence him, but they hadn't broken him yet. Across town, Aaron's phone buzzed violently on the table. He snatched it up, eyes widening as he listened to the shaky voice of a witness describing masked men dragging Dylan into a van. Fury exploded inside him, sharp and raw. His jaw clenched tightly, fingers trembling with a mix of anger and helplessness. "No," he breathed, voice low and resolute. "Not Dylan. Not now." He sprang into action, grabbing his jacket and rallying his closest allies, men who had fought beside him since the festival's chaos. Faces grim, they pored over maps and traces of Dylan's last known movements, their brows furrowed with urgency. Every lead pointed to the abandoned motel on the outskirts, the same derelict place where Dylan had found Lucas's box months ago. The memories of that night, shrouded in dust and darkness, sent a chill through Aaron's bones. The journey to the motel was tense, each mile bringing a heavier silence between them. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the air remained thick with damp decay and the scent of rotting wood. As they neared the crumbling structure, the street lamps faded into darkness, swallowed by creeping fog. The motel loomed ahead, a skeletal relic with shattered windows like dark, empty eyes watching their approach. Aaron motioned for quiet. "Stay close. Watch every shadow." His voice was steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs like a war drum. The team moved like ghosts through the cracked parking lot, boots crunching softly on broken glass. The building's hollow walls seemed to whisper secrets, the faint sound of dripping water echoing through the hallways. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and old smoke. Flickers of broken light danced from their flashlights as they crept through the peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards. Aaron's hand brushed against the cold metal door of a small room, and his pulse quickened. He could hear ragged breathing beyond it. With a swift kick, the door burst open. Dylan slumped against the far wall, bruised and battered but alive. His eyes, wide with relief, locked onto Aaron's. "You came," he whispered hoarsely, voice raw from silence and fear. Aaron offered a shaky smile, crouching beside him. "We're getting you out of here. No more silence." Gently, he helped Dylan to his feet, supporting him as they hurried toward the exit. The room seemed to close in around them as distant footsteps thudded through the hallways. Victor's men were closing in. The team moved fast, the tension snapping like live wire. As they crossed the motel's threshold, the night shattered with the crack of gunfire. Bullets tore through the shadows, splintering wood and ricocheting off concrete. Aaron pushed Dylan behind a crumbling wall, heart pounding with fierce protectiveness. "We've got to move. Keep low," Aaron shouted, voice fierce but controlled. The team exchanged fire with their pursuers, each shot echoing like thunder through the empty halls. Sweat and rain mixed on Aaron's brow as he scanned for a safe path. The rescue was perilous, every step weighed with risk, but determination drove them forward, fierce and unyielding. Dylan's breathing steadied, bolstered by the unwavering presence of his friends. Aaron's grip tightened around the leather-bound ledger in his pack, a symbol of all they fought for, and a reminder of the price already paid. As they burst into the night, disappearing into the cold mist of the surrounding woods, Aaron's voice cut through the chaos, low and burning with resolve. "This ends now," he said, gripping the ledger tighter than ever. Tom's breath caught as he crouched behind a row of towering filing cabinets, the sterile hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. His rough, calloused hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm he forced himself to wear. The corporate headquarters was a maze of cold steel and glass, a fortress designed to keep secrets locked tight, and he was deep inside it. Every step echoed softly on the polished floor, each one a calculated risk. He couldn't afford a single mistake. Dressed in a faded maintenance jumpsuit, Tom blended in with the few cleaning crews and contractors who passed by. His grizzled beard and the permanent scar slicing across his cheek gave him the kind of worn look that didn't raise suspicion here. But beneath his calm exterior, his heart hammered in his chest, the tension stretching his nerves to the breaking point. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and glanced at his watch. The time distraction Aaron and Dylan had set off outside was underway. The faint shrieks of alarms and distant footsteps echoed through the walls. Security teams scrambled to investigate, pulling guards away from their usual posts. Tom knew every second counted. He slipped through a narrow corridor, his boots muffled against the thick carpet. The soft click of a door closing behind him made him freeze, muscles coiled like a spring. From around the corner, he glimpsed two guards, their faces sharp and alert. Holding his breath, Tom pressed himself flat against the wall as they passed, the tension nearly suffocating. "Maintenance crew's been acting suspicious all day," one guard muttered to the other, scanning the hall. Tom's mind raced. If they stopped him, everything would collapse. The ledger, the rescue, the hope, they all depended on what he could find here. He forced himself to relax his shoulders, slowing his breath, and edged past their line of sight. Ahead, the corridor ended at a heavy steel door with a keypad lock. Tom crouched and pulled a small toolkit from his belt, fingers deft and sure despite the adrenaline surging through him. His pulse drummed in his ears as he worked the lock, the faintest click announcing success. He pushed the door open a crack and slipped inside. The room was bathed in dim blue light, banks of computer monitors casting ghostly glows on the walls. Rows of filing cabinets and shelves stacked with manila folders lined the space. But it was the bank of servers and screens that drew Tom's attention. This was the nerve center, Mason's command post for his illicit empire. Tom moved quickly, scanning the screens and rifling through files. He jotted down code numbers, shipment schedules, and financial records. The deeper he dug, the heavier the weight of Mason's operation became. Illegal arms deals, money laundering, bribery, it was all here in stark, undeniable clarity. Then, his eyes caught a series of documents marked with a bright red tab. Shipment manifests, routes, and cargo details. His breath hitched. A massive shipment, just days away. He whispered under his breath. This was it. The last lifeline Mason had to recover from the chaos Aaron's broadcast had unleashed. Destroying this shipment would cripple the whole operation. Tom's fingers shook slightly as he scanned the detailed maps and cargo lists. The shipment included crates labeled with suspicious markings, guns, untraceable cash, and other goods that would never see a legal market. His mind raced to the team waiting outside, their lives depending on this information. He pulled out his radio and pressed the button, voice low but urgent. "I have what we need. Get ready." Flames flickered against the dark sky as the night air hung thick with tension. Aaron crouched low behind a stack of wooden crates near the shipping docks, his breath shallow and controlled. Every snap of a twig or rustle of a leaf seemed magnified in the silence, each sound a possible signal that Victor Hale's men were closing in. Sweat trickled down Aaron's temple, not from heat but from nerves sharpened to a fine edge. Nearby, Dylan's fingers danced rapidly over a battered laptop, the glow from the screen illuminating his face with stark urgency. His eyes flicked between lines of code as he worked to loop the security camera feeds and disable the alarms protecting the docks. "Almost there," Dylan whispered, his voice tight but steady. The soft tapping of keys was the only sound that dared disturb the night. Tom shifted beside Aaron, adjusting the makeshift tools in his hands, a wrench, a crowbar, and a small container of fuel-soaked rags. Despite his injured leg, Tom's jaw was set, his eyes burning with determination. "We hit the trucks first," he said quietly. "If we can stop the shipment, Mason loses his edge." Aaron nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily in his chest. Suddenly, a faint crack echoed in the distance, too deliberate to be random. Aaron froze, signaling the others to stop. Through the shadows, the telltale silhouettes of Victor Hale and his armed squad emerged, moving swiftly with cold precision. "They found us," Aaron hissed, heart pounding. "Get ready." Gunfire erupted, harsh and sudden, tearing through the night. Bullets whizzed past crates, splintering wood and sending sparks flying as they struck metal containers. The acrid smell of smoke mingled with the sharp bite of gunpowder stung Aaron's nostrils. He ducked low, returning fire with calculated bursts, each shot fired with grim purpose. Tom gritted his teeth, limping toward the nearest truck. Ignoring the burning pain in his leg, he poured the fuel-soaked rags into the engine compartment and tossed a match. Flames erupted instantly, licking hungrily at the metal frame. "That's one," he shouted over the chaos, voice strained but fierce. Dylan, still shielded behind a crate, kept the security system loop active, sweat dripping from his brow. "Cameras are down for 2 minutes," he called out. "We have to move fast." Aaron nodded sharply, taking cover and then sprinting toward the next shipment truck with Tom. Victor's men advanced with ruthless speed, their shouts cold and commanding as they pressed the attack. "Retreat's not an option," Victor barked, fury blazing in his eyes. Yet the fire was spreading quickly, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the dockyard. Aaron's mind raced. Each step was a gamble between survival and success. His fingers burned as he fired rounds, then ducked as a bullet tore through the air near his ear. Pain bloomed in his shoulder, but he pushed it aside. His focus was on the bigger prize, crippling Mason Cole's grip on the town. Tom stumbled back, blood seeping through torn fabric on his leg. "I'm hit," he gasped, but refused to fall. Aaron caught him, steadying the man's weight as they edged toward safety. "Almost done here," Dylan announced breathlessly, eyes wide as the last of the alarms fell silent. The docks were a blaze of orange and red, smoke rising thick and choking. The trucks, the containers, everything was aflame, a fiery message that Mason's empire was vulnerable. Aaron glanced at his wounded comrades, their faces streaked with soot and sweat, eyes fierce despite exhaustion. "We're closer than ever," Aaron said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "This is just the beginning of the end for Mason Cole." The rain had just stopped when Aaron's phone buzzed again. This time, a terse text from Dylan. "They took Marcus. Last night. Third one." The words hit Aaron like a punch to the gut. He sat on the edge of his creaking wooden bed, the weight of the news sinking into his chest, making it hard to breathe. Marcus was one of their strongest allies, steady, loyal, and fearless. His arrest on trumped-up charges wasn't just a legal battle. It was a calculated strike meant to break their spirits. Outside, the wind pushed cold air through the cracked window pane, rattling the loose shutters of the Silver Pine pub. The dim glow of a single streetlight cast long, shifting shadows on the empty street below. The town of Grayford, once lively and warm with neighborly chatter, now felt like a cold cage, its heart beating faintly beneath layers of fear and suspicion. Aaron's jaw tightened as he stared at the peeling paint on the wall opposite his bed. The months of struggle, the whispered threats, and the nightly patrols by Mason's men had carved deep lines into his face. Doubt crept in, a shadow he hadn't let touch him before. Was this fight sustainable? How many more friends would they lose before the town could breathe free again? Could justice survive the mounting violence, or would vengeance consume them all? He stood and paced the small room, the floorboards creaking beneath his worn boots. Every step echoed like a countdown in his mind. Dylan's voice, clear and urgent, echoed from a recent conversation. "We can't keep dodging bullets and waiting for some miracle. It's time for the final move. One way or another, this ends tonight." Aaron's fingers curled into fists. "One way or another," he muttered, eyes fixed on the heavy oak door. The struggle was no longer about hiding or surviving. It was about finishing what they had started. Downstairs in the dimly lit diner, Sheriff Hargrove sat alone at the counter, his weary eyes flicking nervously to the dark corners of the room. He ran a trembling hand through his thinning gray hair and glanced at the worn ledger resting beside his half-empty coffee cup. The weight of his decision pressed hard on his shoulders. Cooperating with the state investigators meant betraying men he had once called colleagues. It also meant risking everything if Mason's network discovered his treason. The sheriff's voice was low and cautious when he spoke into his phone. "We're ready to move. The evidence is enough for a formal raid. But Mason's reach, it's deep. We'll need to be precise." A pause. Then, "No mistakes." The line went dead. He stared into the fading steam of his coffee, silently praying the tide was finally turning. Back at the Silver Pine, Aaron, Dylan, and Tom gathered in the pub's back room. A cramped space thick with dust, stale smoke, and the ghosts of conversations past. The single bare bulb overhead flickered, casting erratic light across their tense faces. Tom's scarred cheek twitched with anxiety, while Dylan's youthful eyes burned with a mix of fear and fierce determination. Aaron leaned forward, fingers resting on the rough wooden table, voice steady but edged with raw emotion. "We've lost too many already. Tonight we finish this. No more running. No more hiding." The night air was thick with tension as the first crackling radios whispered commands in hushed tones. Flashing lights from the convoy of unmarked vehicles cut through the darkness, casting eerie shadows across Mason Cole's sprawling estate. State police and federal agents moved like ghosts through the perimeter, silent except for the soft crunch of boots on gravel and the faint hum of surveillance drones overhead. The compound, an imposing fortress of steel and stone, loomed against the black sky, its windows darkened and cameras blinking red warnings. Time was slipping away. Mason had to be caught before he vanished into the underground maze he had built. Inside the command vehicle, Aaron Trent's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes fixed on the blueprints of the estate spread across the dashboard. Beside him, Dylan's fingers danced over a tablet, feeding real-time intel from hacked cameras to the officers outside. Tom Jensen leaned forward, his scarred face tight with determination as he whispered into his radio. "Teams in position. Movement detected near the east tunnel entrance." Aaron's heart pounded, the years of searching, fearing, and fighting boiling down to this moment. "Hold your positions," he ordered softly. "No mistakes." Suddenly, the silence shattered as a loud explosion rocked the far wall, dust and debris billowing into the cold air. Mason's guards scrambled, weapons drawn, but they were too late. Agents swarmed through the breach with practiced precision, firing warning shots that echoed like thunder through the compound. Aaron's pulse quickened as he followed the tracking signals. Mason was moving underground. The tunnel entrances were narrow and winding, a labyrinth designed to trap and confuse, but the team was prepared. Crouching low, Aaron led the small group into the damp, claustrophobic tunnels, the smell of mold and stale air thick in their nostrils. The only light came from their flashlights, beams cutting through the darkness as they pressed forward, every step measured and silent. The sound of dripping water echoed off the walls, mingling with the distant thud of boots behind them. Mason was close. Ahead, a faint glow flickered, a forgotten storage room, filled with crates and discarded equipment. Mason's breath came heavy and uneven, the arrogance that once defined him replaced by raw panic. He glanced desperately over his shoulder, eyes wild as the officers closed in. "You don't understand what you've done," he hissed, voice shaking with fear and fury as hands grabbed his wrists and snapped cuffs around them. "You think this ends with me? There are others, bigger players." Aaron met Mason's gaze steadily, feeling a cold fire ignite inside him. "Then we'll be ready." His voice was calm but resolute, every word weighted by years of loss and fight. The moment was a victory, a crushing blow to the man who had haunted Grayford's shadows. But Aaron knew this was not the end. Mason's empire had roots deeper than they could see, tangled in corruption that stretched beyond their town's borders. The journey back through the tunnels was quiet, the air heavy with the gravity of what they'd accomplished. Outside, flashing lights bathed the estate as agents secured the grounds and loaded Mason into a waiting transport. Reporters already gathered at the perimeter, sensing the storm of revelations to come. In the weeks that followed, Mason Cole's trial became a media sensation. The courtroom buzzed with the whispers of long-buried secrets as testimony peeled back the layers of his criminal empire. Townsfolk watched with a mix of relief and sorrow, the the scars of betrayal etched deep but beginning to heal. Aaron, Dylan, and Tom found moments of quiet strength in their shared victory, knowing their fight had made a difference, even if the road ahead remained uncertain. On a chilly morning, as frost clung to the edges of the courthouse steps, Aaron stood alone, staring at the towering building where justice was being served. The weight of 6 long years pressed against his chest but felt lighter somehow. He breathed deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs, and whispered, "For Lucas," he said softly, "and for all of us." The evening air was cool, tinged with the scent of pine and fresh rain. Aaron stood on the porch of the Silver Pine pub, his fingers resting lightly on the weathered wooden railing. The sun, a fading ember behind the distant hills, cast long shadows across the quiet town below. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful, too peaceful for a place that had endured so much. His gaze drifted over the streets of Greyford, where the steady hum of life was returning, cautious but determined. The pub's windows were no longer boarded up. Instead, soft light spilled from within, warm and inviting. Inside, familiar faces gathered, not just to drink, but to talk, to reconnect. The Silver Pine was no longer a symbol of fear or secrecy. It was becoming a home again. Aaron could hear the faint clink of glasses, low murmurs of conversation, and even a soft laugh that reminded him of the brother he had lost. It was a sound he hadn't heard in years. Aaron's jaw tightened as memories surged. Lucas behind the bar, his quick smile, the way his eyes held a hint of guarded sorrow. Those days felt distant, yet the pain lingered, raw and unhealed. "We lost more than a man," Aaron murmured, voice barely above the whispering wind. "We lost a part of ourselves." He pulled his jacket tighter around him, feeling the rough leather against his skin, grounding him. The fight to rebuild Greyford was far from over. Corruption might have been exposed, but trust was fragile, and old wounds ran deep. Every day brought new challenges, rebuilding relationships, healing broken spirits, and standing watch for shadows that might return. Yet Aaron knew this town was fighting back, and so was he. The door behind him creaked open, and Dylan stepped onto the porch, his camera bag slung over one shoulder. His youthful energy contrasted with the weight Aaron carried, but there was a quiet strength in the young man's eyes. Dylan had become more than an ally. He was a chronicler of their struggle, capturing moments of pain and hope with his lens. "The community center wants you at the meeting," Dylan said softly, offering a tentative smile. "They're organizing a cleanup of the park." Aaron nodded, grateful for the normalcy this represented. "Good. It's time." Greyford looked forward, not back. His voice was steady but laced with fatigue. They stood side by side, watching as a group of men gathered across the street, ready to volunteer. Among them was Tom Jensen, still limping slightly from his injury but fierce in spirit. Tom caught Aaron's eye and gave a short nod, a silent promise that they would keep protecting this town together. "Feels different now," Dylan said, breaking the silence. "Like maybe we actually made a difference." Aaron glanced at him, the weight of years in his gaze. "We did, but the scars won't fade overnight." The sky deepened into twilight, stars beginning to prick the darkening canvas. Aaron's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the cost of their fight, the friends they had lost, the nights spent haunted by uncertainty. Yet beneath the sorrow was a stubborn hope. Greyford was no longer a place ruled by fear but one shaped by courage. He looked back at the pub, its sign swinging gently in the breeze, and whispered, "Lucas's story wasn't just about loss. It was about the strength to rise again. The truth can't stay buried forever. If you stand for justice and answers, hit subscribe and join the channel. Together we rise." Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional, created to highlight the shocking consequences of unresolved mysteries and the search for truth. Its purpose is to inspire conversations about justice, closure, and the impact of hidden secrets.